So as I told you, there are 3 R's. So the first one was recording, right? So how do we record? This is the format in which we record. Originally it was called as cognitive log. Okay, but then I prefer calling it as CBT log. Why? For 2 reasons. One, we are using a CBT tool. And second, when we talk about CBT, it is not just the cognitions, but it is also the behavior which is playing a very, very important role. So I prefer calling it CBT log. The original title is cognitive log, okay, for this tool. For the questions which had come up earlier, how to go ahead, how to address issues with your client, this is going to be the first tool for you when you're using CBT, okay? So what you do with your client is, most of the time, the problem or the issue that they come up with to you is about an emotion, right? So say for instance, let's talk about this. So when you are talking with your client, you ask them, how was your week? What all did you do? Anything in particular that you want to talk about today? And your client might say, yeah, this one incident, something, I was feeling very, very upset that day. Okay, so now what is this? Upset is a feeling. Okay, your client was feeling upset. So now you see this in the log. The second column is about feelings. So you can write it down. Now this particular log, you can do it with your client. Okay, like I generally prefer doing it that way. I try to put one sheet in front of my client, and I also do it similarly. So I can keep that log with me, and I can also ask them to take that log away with themselves. So it gives them a framework about how to work on themselves. So with your first thing is the emotion. So we have understood the client was feeling upset. You put that down. And you can also ask them, what was the situation that was happening around you that time? So, maybe this person could come up with, I was just reading this textbook, this chapter, I had to finish that day, and I was not able to do it. I started doing it and I started feeling very, very upset in that given moment. So it is very, very important what kind of and how the rapport is being built, which will be your first session. So these days, because of all of this is happening online, I generally spend some time talking to them on the phone first. We try talking, we try building that rapport. Only when they are a little comfortable, I take them on the next session on a video call if they prefer. So, we need to consider that as well. Are they okay to come on video? If not, then you just have to stick to audio calls, but most of the time they do. So here again, the rapport building is, it's going to be a skill. And I think that will come as you keep practicing it with your clients, okay? So once the rapport building is done, it is in place, that is where they will start talking about it. And the fact that they have come to see you, that definitely means that they know that there's something that is not going very right with them, and they need help, and that help will come from you, and that is how they have come to you, right? So once you know the emotion, the feeling that this person will tell you, I was feeling upset, you're going to ask for the situation. What was happening that time? Do you remember anything while you were feeling upset? Was there anything happening? And the client might say like, yeah, I was trying to study and this chapter looked so difficult. It was just, I couldn't understand anything. And I started feeling upset. Now, what is the situation? Trying to study for a chapter and for some course, and this chapter felt very, very difficult in that moment. This is going to be your situation. Okay. Personally, when I do this, I also try to connect with a lot of other things with my client. Like, do you remember what were you wearing? Or say if it was about another person, I also try to I also ask these questions to them, like, do you remember what was this other person wearing? How was the expression on this other person's face? Once you start doing this, you will also experience that connecting, that connection builds pretty strong. Okay, now this is not a part of traditional CBT. This is something what I'm giving you out of my own work experience that I have had. Okay, so I try my best to mentally try to just bring in those cues into the therapeutic setup, where the client can connect very well with what was actually happening. So you have all the details of the situation. Okay, so this all has to go in your first column, where you're writing the facts of what was happening in that given moment. At the same time, your client can also be writing it for himself or herself. Then again you move to the feelings. So again you will, you'll repeat what your client had said. Okay, so now this situation made you feel upset. Do you remember how much was that feeling of being upset? Like, can you give me a score? Now the score can be on 0 to 10, 0 being minimum, like almost nothing, and 10 being maximum. Where would you want to rate this feeling of upset? And they would be like, probably it was 8. Okay, so now put it down. You have the label, so you have the name of the emotion that they were experiencing. You also have a number for that emotion. And you will also ask your client whether, while this person was experiencing, or say was feeling upset, or whatever emotion it was at that time, was there anything happening in the body, any bodily sensations, physiological sensations? And this person might just say, yeah, a little bit of, just like back pain, shoulder pain, not much, but yeah, it was. You can make a note of this. You have to make note of all these things, and you will also ask your client to fill it up if they are willing to do it with you. So after you have noted the feelings, and the physiological experience, what you were experiencing in that given moment, then you move on to the third column. And this is what we have to figure out, because the second one is what your client knows to great extent. So they know what they were feeling. What they don't know now is the thoughts which were going on at that time. So here you're going to write down the unhelpful thoughts and behaviors. So the first one is about categorizing the unhelpful thoughts. Here, what are you going to pick up on? The automatic negative thoughts. How do we come here on this first point? So you will ask your client, okay, so XYZ, while this was happening with you, like you opened your book, you started studying, and you started finding it to be way too difficult to understand, you were feeling very upset. So what were you thinking that time? What were the thoughts that crossed your mind? And this person might say that this is way too difficult and I will never ever be able to complete this portion and I'm going to fail. Okay, so now again you will pick up on, okay, these are automatic thoughts, and they also have cognitive distortions there. Now, so you are going to make a note of this, okay? And you will also ask your client to make a note of this thought. Maybe at that given moment, you would not really want to tell them, look, this is negative that you're thinking, this is not right. No, right now we're just taking a log, okay? We're just taking note of what is happening. Then we ask them, what did you do then in that situation? What was the behavior that came up? I just closed my book and I slept away. Okay, now what is this? Avoidant behavior. Is it a helpful behavior? No, it is not a helpful behavior. It is unhelpful behavior. So you're going to note down this behavior. Also ask your client to note down what was the behavior that you did in that given moment. Now, then we come to the following column, that is about alternative thoughts. So in alternative thoughts, the first one is how you're going to reframe an unhelpful thought. If it is a cognitive distortion, it is not true, of course. So we know that if it is a cognitive distortion, it is distorted, and so it is not true. So in this given situation, you are going to ask your client to come up with what could be an alternative way to think in this situation. So there was a situation, you felt upset, and this is what you thought, that this is very difficult and I will never be able to complete it, and I will never be able to achieve or say complete this chapter, this particular chapter. So what could be a different way of looking at it? At times they can come up with an answer for this. If not, there are different ways to go about it. So one of them is the second thing, the second part, if you can read it. What would you say to your friend? Say your friend was in a similar situation. Okay, how are you going to do it? If possible, if the rapport building has been done properly, you could also have a role play with your client there and then, where you start becoming the client and let your client become your therapist. And now ask your client to question you. What are the other ways in which you could have thought? Now, this is the time when they themselves will come up with alternative ways to think about it. Like, say, probably, I was thinking that this is way too difficult and I will never be able to complete this particular chapter. Now here, the client might come up with alternative thoughts that, okay, this seems very difficult right now, but maybe, probably I'm too tired right now. I'll take a break for some time. I'll freshen up and then come back to this topic. If I'm not able to do it, I might just call up a friend and ask for help. Or even if, say, I'm just not able to grasp it, it is still okay. This is not really going to define me as a person. So now these are alternative thoughts which the client will come up with. Okay, you have to elicit this from your client. Okay, you are not going to give this out to your client. They will come up with all these alternatives, right? Now, alternative thoughts are something that you want to elicit from your client. And when you want your client to come up with this, the best way to go about it is ask them to, you can put this question across to them. What would you say to your friend if your friend was stuck in a similar situation? What would you say? Or you could also have a role play kind of a thing where you're exchanging roles, that I am your client and you be my therapist. And now this is a problem I'm posing. When you do these activities, they come up with responses. So they will come up with alternative ways of thinking in this particular situation, which could be, it is okay that I'm finding it difficult right now. Maybe I'm just too tired and so I'm finding it difficult. Once I take a break, I freshen up, I'll be in a better position to do it. Or say, I could ask my friend, I'll call her up and she might explain it. And even if I'm not able to do it in this lifetime, it is still okay. It is not important for my survival. Now these are the things which your client will come up with. Okay, so with these two activities, one is where you ask them this question, what would you say to a friend? And the second would be, you could do a role play. Also, lately, especially with these corona, when the corona thing started and all, a lot of cases, like there was a exponential rise in the number of anxiety cases that we were receiving. And I remember one day just spontaneously coming up with this question, which you can of course go ahead, you're free to ask this question to your clients. So I happened to ask this client, like, okay, so what if after all this, like someday all this thing will get over, the pandemic will be over, and say the regulations will be lifted and everything will be okay. After that, say there is a newspaper reporter who comes to you and starts taking your interview and asks you, hey, how did you manage? So what all are you going to say? And now I asked my client to come up with all the things. And this is where they will come up with so many responses which they were filtering out when they were feeling anxious. Now the cognitive distortion here is filtering. So if there is mental filtering, you can also go in this way. Okay, so if you are being interviewed, what all things would you want to talk about you? This is where they will come up with. Also lately I have used one more technique with my client. This client had he was diagnosed with clinical depression. So I had asked him to make his own CV. Okay, uh, CV, not really the way we make it, but all I asked him to do is just put down on paper everything that you would want to present to a prospective job, a company, an organization where you're applying for a job. How would you want to put things down to them? And now this person jots down all good things that they think about them, right? So this also becomes a very beautiful technique. So be as creative as possible. Okay, you do not really have to stick to just the typical ones that we have in books. Be creative when you're using all these techniques. What you want as a therapist is your client should become more aware of what are the alternative healthy ways of thinking in this given situation. That should be your aim. Hmm? And once this thought is understood, what you're going to ask this client now, so what could be the alternative behavior? Like the behavior that she indulged in was she closed the book and she slept off. So what could you have done differently in the same situation? Maybe I could have just taken a break for 5 minutes. I could have gone splashed some water on my face, maybe had say a cup of tea, coffee, or say water, just felt a little fresh, and then I come back and sit for this particular study. Now this becomes an alternative behavior which your client will come up with. Okay, and now you will ask your client again the feeling or the the thought, the feeling the feeling which he or she is going to experience after this new thought and new behavior has been replaced in the original place. So now, feeling after shift in behavior or thought, rate this feeling. So again, you are going to ask your client, say after all this is done, how do you think you would have felt or you will feel in future if you're going to do this? Will there be this feeling of not feeling very good, or say um, whatever the feeling was. Okay, so it was, if it is angry or something, how much do you think it would be? So maybe if it was 7, then it has now come down to maybe 2. Okay, so now you'll make note of it. It has come down from 7 or 8 to come down to 2. And now compare it with the original feeling. So you have to put this across to your client. Do you see a change there? And this is how it starts getting registered, that, oh, it was the thought and the behavior which was actually having an impact on how I was feeling. And once I change these, there is a change which comes in what I'm feeling. Okay, so this is an example of how you go about when you're doing CBT log.